The House Elections Committee will come to order. Welcome, everyone. We have a special hearing today where we are voting on the confirmation of 3 members appointed to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. Thanks to everyone for coming. I know that 8:30 in the morning on the day after, or the first day after break is kind of a tall order, but thanks for coming. This was the only spot in the next few days when it made sense to do this in coordinating with House leadership. So thanks for your patience, your indulgence, your energy. For those of you who are either new to the legislature or new to the committee, this is a sort of special process. As you know, typically, various positions that require confirmation only require Senate confirmation. This is one of those rare instances where confirmation requires a vote of the House and the Senate. Now, the margin that is required here in the committee is a bare majority, as with any bill. But on the floor of the House, this is like a bonding bill. It requires 60% or 3/5 or 81 votes. So on the floor of the House, this will require a supermajority, so it truly does need to be bipartisan, and I would hope that coming out of the committee, any nomination would be as well. So that's just a quick primer. The only other thing I'll add is that I'm sure all of you have the information in your bill briefs as well, or in your committee briefs, that this is an interesting process, the way that the board is structured. 2 members of the board must be former legislators from different parties. 2 members must be individuals who have not been public officials, not held any political party office other than precinct delegate, or been elected to public office for which a party designation is required in the 3 years preceding the appointment. And then 2 members must support different political parties. So it's a board that's comprised of people from different backgrounds, ideologically and otherwise, and this is a system that has served us well, I think, for the past many years on the Campaign Finance Board. And obviously the stakes are high. This is a board that serves as, in essence, a traffic cop, for lack of a better term, over our campaign finance system. So we want people who have intelligence and credibility and experience and a willingness to serve and are thoughtful and are creative about how to solve and manage some of these problems. So we're really privileged to have with us today the 3 nominees by Governor Dayton. And I will just say, personally, you know, I've served here under 2 governors, Governor Pawlenty and Governor Dayton, and both governors, I think, have nominated really exceptional people for this board, regardless of party. I think they've really taken great pains, in my judgment anyway, since I've been here, to nominate people of great intellect and character and ability. And so I'm happy to have before the committee 3 more who, in my judgment, fit that description. So in no particular order, I think we'll call them up one by one, and obviously we'll take a motion separately on each nomination. And what I'd like to have is have the nominees come up, again, in the order that I call them, and just say a little bit about their background. All members here have some written materials on them, but they may want to flesh out a little bit more about their personal background, and then why they choose to serve on the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, and maybe, I think, from my own personal vantage point, what they might see as the most significant challenges or issues facing the board over the next few years. And then, obviously, we'll open it up to any members' comments and questions from people here in the audience as well who wish to ask one or wish to testify in some way. So with that, in no particular order, I'd like to call Mr. Ed Oliver up. And I think as he's getting situated, I'll make the formal motion right now. I'll move that the appointment of Ed Oliver to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board be recommended to be confirmed. That's my motion. Mr. Oliver, or should I say Senator Oliver, welcome or welcome back to the Capitol. I know you've already had your Senate confirmation hearing, but thank you for coming. And if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and saying a bit about why you wish to serve on the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Ed Oliver, and I did not seek this office, but this current administration came to me and said, would you like to see if you could join this organization? I said I certainly would, because I think it's very important, and I've been in campaigns and I know how that goes. My background is primarily business, and I served in the financial service industry and still do at this time. I also serve as an arbitrator with the in the securities business, and so I've had a little experience of that. And, Mr. Chairman, I think I'd be happy to answer any questions that any member would have.
I just have one, Mr. Oliver. Any particular issues or challenges that you see over the next few years, even just very broadly speaking?
I can't really forecast that, and so I don't see any specific issue over the next couple of years that could be challenging to us. And of course, it's always challenging once you get into an election. I was just reading the Wall Street Journal in Ohio is just now debating whether political candidates lie, and if so, is that can that be can they go against someone for lying?
Any other member questions?
Right here.
Oh, Representative Huntley.
I don't have a question. I just have a statement about Mr. Oliver, Senator Oliver. We worked together for, 15, 20 years on the Great Lakes Commission?
Yes.
And having meetings all over basically the eastern half of the northern half of the country. And during that time, I was very impressed with his ability to not be ideological, but just work to get things done. And he was very good at that, and I assume he would be very good on this committee as well.
Thank you, Representative Huntley. Point well taken. That's his reputation, certainly, from my standpoint. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Oliver, could you tell me, from looking at accepting this position, you thought about where maybe the Campaign Finance Board, maybe where it could improve, and then maybe what do you think the biggest thing the legislature could do to help the Campaign Finance Board?
Mr. Oliver.
Well, Mr. Chairman and Representative, I guess from my short time exposure to this, it seems to me that the board needs some more people, and then that is happening, and that they would be able to take things and rule on them within a reasonable period of time.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, could you walk us through maybe your philosophy on how you'd make decisions that would approach you where, how would you, what would be your decision-making process with an item that came up before the Campaign Finance Board?
Mr. Chairman and Representative, in this situation, I would think that the process would be, first of all, that each commissioner should be knowledgeable about the situation in which he's going to make a ruling, and so that requires extensive reading. The amount of paper that I've served on a couple of commissions, and the amount of paper involved in this is much more than either of the other two. So there's a lot of paper to read, and then to make some decisions and discussion. The decision comes from thinking it through, listening to your colleagues, and certainly if the person who's accused or the accuser come before our committee, that participation in answering any questions such as you are questioning me now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak or testify about this nominee? Okay, seeing no further comments or questions, I'll renew my motion that the appointment of Ed Oliver to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board be recommended to be confirmed. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion prevails. Congratulations,
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you.
Thank you. The next nominee is Christian Sande. And again, Mr. Sande, if you just state your name for the record, say a little bit about yourself, why you wish to serve on the board, and if you would, say a little bit about what you see as the foremost challenges over the next number of years.
Sure.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Simon, members of the committee. It is an honor to be in front of you. By way of background, I've been appointed to fill out the remaining term of Andy Lugar after he was nominated by the President to be the U.S. Attorney. So the term that I have been appointed for, which I'm asking for confirmation, would go through the end of this year. And at that point, I'll decide if I want to ask to be reappointed, and we'll see how it goes. But it is a real honor to be nominated. You've heard from other members here on the committee. It's really impressive. We've got two former senators, a former state representative, and a former chief administrative law judge, and a former district court judge, and to be in their company alone is an honor. Myself, I grew up in Minnesota, in both actually in Representative Lane and Representative Bernardi's district. My folks moved, but within New Brighton, so I have the opportunity of living in both of their districts when I was a kid. I went to Hamline University and William Mitchell College of Law, and have been in private practice ever since. I'm a member of the Minnesota and the State of Washington Bar Associations. From 1996 until 2005, I practiced at the Lockridge Grindal Nowen firm. While I was there, I handled an awful lot of campaign finance and campaign law issues, serving as a treasurer of political committees, political funds, candidate committees. And so I do understand what people who are regulated by the board face and the decision-making that they go through. I've actually signed those forms and responded to correspondence from the board. Since 2005, I ran for Secretary of State and then have set up my own firm. And it's easy for me now to take this opportunity to serve on the board because I haven't practiced in campaign finance specifically in matters in front of the board in a year. And I've told the governor, and I'll tell you that if confirmed for this board, I will not practice in any area on matters that could come in front of the board. My law practice now is in class action litigation, antitrust law, and also in securities law cases. Those usually go to arbitration. So that's my background. I think I've already answered it, but it's a neat opportunity to serve on the board in an area where I have some experience. I think we're at a change in how we're dealing with campaign finance and disclosure law issues in the nation and in our state, where up until a few years ago the focus was really in restricting money and limiting money and finding ways to either get around limits or restricting people to limits. Since there have been changes, particularly from the Supreme Court, I think the focus is shifting now much more to disclosure. So I think the challenges that the board faces most urgently are ways to improve public access to information that the board already has through its website and through other avenues, so that it's easier for people to access the information that the board already collects.
Thank you, Mr. Sande. Any other member questions or comments? Mr. Sande. Representative Verdal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in looking over materials here on membership criteria, one is that no more than 3 members of the board may support the same political party. And I believe that there are 2 Democrat members currently on the board. Do you have a political party persuasion?
I'm a Democrat. I'm sorry, Chairman Simon, Representative Verdal, I'm a Democrat.
Okay. So.
Any other member comments, questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Sandy, similar questions. Could you walk me through what you think or where you think the current board could improve? And then what do you think the biggest thing the legislature could do to help the campaign finance board?
Mr. Sandy.
Chair Simon, Representative Sanders. I think where the board could improve is in improving its access to information. I think folks in Bemidji and Worthington should have the same availability of information as anyone who walks in the front door of the Campaign Finance Board. I think we can make that available through our website and through other online sources. I think the board has an excellent staff who's been there for quite some time, so they have a great institutional knowledge. The challenge now is just making that information more available through current means on the internet and otherwise. With respect to what more can the legislature do, I don't want to sound like an echo of what every state agency says and tell you we just need more money. I think that the board can think creatively about where it might need some more money, particularly coming up next year into a budget year, and maybe focus specifically on maybe some one-time expenditures with improving our website. I can tell you from my own experience in private practice and from working with my clients, websites are outrageously expensive. And so it amazes me what we have to, what anyone has to pay for something that really doesn't have bricks and mortar. And I would, I'll just tell you that if we come back asking for money for more to improve the website, that's why. I think that our executive director can answer more specifically with the budget, but I think by way of comparison, he made an interesting illustration this past year in the joint hearing that we had in the fall, which, if you were to compare the Washington Public Disclosure Commission to the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board, like I said, I'm admitted to practice in Washington and I have an office in Seattle, so I kind of keep an eye on what they're doing. I'm paraphrasing, but I believe that their jurisdiction covers roughly the same number of members and roughly the same number of political committees and political funds, and their budget is twice what ours is. And if you go and look at the website for the Washington Public Disclosure Commission, boy, it's something to see. It's really well run. It's easily searchable, easily navigable. I think that our goal, at least my goal as a board member, would be a way to try to improve that. But I'm cautious of use of taxpayer dollars, and I think that our executive director has done a great job of wringing out all of the value that we can get from the money. But I'm concerned that we're going to have to come back and ask you for more money, Representative.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then, Mr. Sandy, if you could walk me through kind of your decision-making process on an issue that would come up in front of the board. How would you go through in making your decision?
Mr. Sandy.
Mr. Chair, Representative Sanders, Senator Oliver is right. We get a lot of paper. Generally, before each board meeting, we get anywhere from 200 to 400 pages of paper to read through, and we get it about 7 days before the meeting. And the way that I approach it now is to read through all of it. There's one advantage with computers is we can get them all as electronic documents, and so it cuts down on handling of all the stuff. It's easier to actually go through and read. The deliberative process is I will look through the information that we have. We also have historical data that's available to the board, so we can go back and look at our historical investigative matters as well. And usually the Thursday, Friday, Monday before Tuesday meeting, staff at the board is very available for us to call and ask questions about how things might have been done in the past. And I think that an area where the board is going to endeavor to improve is to assure parties, both complainants if it's dealing with a complaint or someone who is the recipient of an inquiry from the board, to make sure that they have an opportunity to come in front of the board. After I was nominated by the governor, I went down and had coffee with Tom Heffelfinger our former U.S. attorney who sat on the campaign finance board, and asked him what his thoughts were. He said what he most valued was, after going through all the papers, having an opportunity to sit across the table from someone in a hearing and hear their side of the story and ask them questions directly. I think the board can do a better job of making sure that people can come in without the board having made its decision. I always felt when I was a board, not always, there were times when I was an attorney in front of the board, this is many years ago, a prior executive director as well, that I felt like when I spoke in front of the board, it was a fait accompli, that the board's decision was already made on the papers that they had, and they were just being Minnesota nice and giving me an opportunity to come speak. I think that the board can do a better job of making sure that we don't make up our mind before we have a chance to hear from the parties.
Thank you, Sanders. Any other member questions or comments? Representative Johnson.
Mr. Chair. Find my notes here. I guess one question I have is, we've seen when we've had some complaints come into the campaign finance board, it seems like it takes a year and a half for some of them to get completed and before there's any information given out as for the disposition of the complaint. My question to you would be, what would you consider a reasonable time for an investigation to be done and the board to respond to that complaint? How much time would you say is a reasonable period of time?
Mr. Sandy.
Chair Simon and Representative Johnson. It's hard for me to say specifically a reasonable time for complaints across the board, because it depends. If you have a complaint against, let's say, relating to independent expenditures and potential cooperation between an independent group and a candidate, it's usually several candidates. In that case, the investigation requires not only just communicating with the group itself, but with several candidates, and that can take some time. If it's just a complaint dealing with a specific entity, a fund or a candidate, that can be quicker. I think one thing that the board is going to be discussing today that may address generally the issue of timing, I think the board is going to move ahead with a rulemaking this year that will deal with setting out our investigative procedures, a process that we handle things, opportunities for parties to appear in front of the board, and also opportunities where we may be able to do a summary proceeding, for example, where the facts aren't in dispute. So we don't need to be taking deposition and dealing with statements, but we can hear from the parties on whether there's a disagreement as to interpretation of law. All of that, I think, will speed up the process. So it's hard for me to say a specific time period. I do think that in the past, it may have taken longer, but it was only in last year that the legislature increased the budget of the board significantly. That allowed the board to bring on one new full-time equivalent and one part-time person that again will relieve some of the burden from staff. I think that will allow us to accelerate things as well.
Representative Johnson, any follow-up? Any other member comments, questions? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to testify as to this nominee? Okay, seeing no one, then I will make the motion that the appointment of Christian Sandy to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board be recommended to be confirmed. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion prevails. Congratulations, Mr. Sandy.
Thank you.
The third nominee today is Judge Jon Stafsholt. Judge, welcome. If you would just say a few words introduce yourself, say a few words about yourself, and then perhaps why you seek appointment to the board.
All right, I served as a district judge in west central Minnesota for 30 years, being elected to 5 terms, and I retired about a year ago. Before I was a judge, I was the Grand County attorney and also an attorney in general practice. I was chair of the general practice section of the State Bar Association and also chair of the agricultural law section of the State Bar before that. And I've been involved in, I've served on Minnesota Supreme Court rules committees, criminal rules, the civil rules, the commitment rules, and the juvenile rules. So I've been involved in formulating rules that govern the rules of court that we practice in. Since I retired, I've been trying to continue my community service, which has been my whole career. And so when I saw the opening on the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, I thought that looked like a judicial type position. It's something that I would probably enjoy working on and would keep me intellectually stimulated and involved, so that's why I applied.
Thank you. Judge, can you comment a little bit, or if you care to, about what you see as the challenges, if any, facing the board over the next several years?
Okay. Well, I'm very new to the board, so I'm not aware of too much about what's happened in the past, but I am aware of U.S. Supreme Court decisions that have affected campaigning. The most recent one is the McCutcheon decision by our U.S. Supreme Court, and prior to that, Citizens United. So I think a challenge for this board and for the legislature is to find ways to comply with the new law as stated by the U.S. Supreme Court. So that would, I think, would be a good challenge and would require quite a bit of research, and so that's. And also, I'm very familiar with rules development, and if there are ways we can improve the rules on this campaign finance board, then I think we should do that with, obviously with legislative input.
Thank you, Judge. Any member comments or questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll kind of ask the same questions as I did to the previous two interviewees. Could you walk me through maybe a few things? I know you said you're new to the Campaign Finance Board, but where you think the board could improve? Or maybe what's the, one or two things that you hope to bring to the board as well that you would think would improve the board?
Judge Stafsholt.
I think I'd like to see rules that makes it easier for candidates for public office to comply with the rules, so that they're clearly understandable, and that for people first time running for office, they're bound to make some mistakes or honest errors, and I think we have to be aware of that and make it easier for people to fill out their forms and give them whatever guidance they need.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then what do you think the legislature's role, or what could they do to help improve the functions of the Campaign Finance Board?
Well,
Judge Staff.
Obviously, if the board is well staffed, there's plenty of people to get the work done in a timely fashion. So if the board needs an extra staff member for investigation or whatever, it'd be nice if the legislature would approve that. Also, as the legislature deals with some of these overall broader issues brought about by the recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions, this Campaign Finance Board can provide whatever input you need by way of expert opinion but it's a growing area of law that we're all going to have to be concerned about.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then following up on a question that Representative Erdahl asked to the last testifier, we know that no more than 3 members of the board may support the same political party. Could you tell us what party affiliations or what party affiliation that you have?
Judge Stafsholt.
Well, right now, none. When I was a young lawyer, I was involved in the DFL party. But for the 30 years I've served as a judge, I've been nonpartisan. And I know the board is, under the statute, it's like a bipartisan board, but in practice it runs as a nonpartisan board. Most of their decisions are consensus, unanimous decisions, and I understand that when there is a split decision, it is a non-party line votes. So I would I continue to be nonpartisan in this role. It's just an extension of being a judge.
Representative Sanders.
I'll pass for now.
Representative Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Judge Stafsholt, welcome to the committee. Twice in your comments that you brought up Supreme Court actions that I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I tend to believe that you have some angst perhaps or some concerns about those. You mentioned a Citizens United decision, and recently the Supreme Court also has said that individuals can contribute, in essence, more than the $1,000 limit per cycle that the legislature and governor have authorized under statute. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about it? And again, I heard you say it once, and I heard you bring it up again. I just have a feeling that you may want to tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that, because you have brought it up on a couple of different occasions with your comments today, sir.
Judge Stafsholt.
I'm nowhere near an expert on campaign finance law. I hope to be one as we get into this. But I think when the Supreme Court makes a major decision, then it's up to every administrative agency or legislature to comply with the law as stated by the Supreme Court, whether you agree with it or not. You know, it is the law, and we have to find ways to make the system work in a constitutional manner. I don't have any specific suggestions in that regard. It's going to require a lot of research, but it's something that we're all going to have to be concerned and working with. The Supreme Court is, one is a branch of government, and we have to respect their opinions and apply the law so that it is consistent with the Supreme Court opinion.
Representative Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Judge, just a little bit of a follow-up on that. Right now, under Minnesota law, as you're probably familiar with as well, an individual can contribute no more than $1,000 to any one candidate running for public office in an election cycle, and the legislature just approved that this past session, the 2013 session. Right now, we don't have any thresholds on how much an individual can contribute to any political party or to a political a legislative caucus or other kinds of things. Do you see that as a disparity? And when you're talking about what the Supreme Court has to say on that, aren't they just trying to level the playing field for candidates being able to not be hemmed in as candidates to receive funds from individuals, where an individual can make sizable contributions to a political caucus?
Judge Stafsholt.
I don't know where to go with that. It's I'm aware that political action committees have a lot more influence now than political parties do, and I think some candidates are really concerned about that too. There was a special election in another state where the two candidates apologized to each other for the negative ads that the political action committees were running. So the candidates themselves didn't like what was going on. I don't know, under First Amendment protection that the Supreme Court has outlined, whether there's a whole lot that can be done about that. It's a matter that we have to look into, and And I don't know if level the playing field is the way to go. I think we want to encourage people to run for public office in our country, and we have to make it easy for them to do so. And as far as the application of the new Supreme Court decisions, that is the law, and we're going to have to find a way to make it work. I don't know if that specifically answers your question. I don't have any specific agenda or suggestion, other than that we have to carefully look at this and proceed accordingly.